Welcome to module number 2, where we're going to look at building your connections. I hope you've enjoyed the course so far and that you're following along with the workbook. Topics we're going to cover in this module are knowing your audience, building authentic connections, and the key there is authentic connections, active listening and empathy, finding common ground, and transparency and authenticity. All the modules in this course are important to developing your career. But if you only really wanted to focus in on one and pay attention to it, this is probably it, because there's a lot packed into the next few slides. But these are the skills that are going to be super critical and super important to building your relationships with others, which is ultimately going to determine the success in your career. Soft skills, power skills, call them whatever you want. This is really where the magic happens, and it's the least taught or seldomly taught, never taught topics, which is the root of a lot of frustration in the industry. Okay, so without further ado, let's get going on module 2. Before we start to look at techniques and skills and building connections with different people, it's important to know who to spend your time on, especially in the beginning, to give some thought and define who your target audience is, so you can really focus on those and hone those skills and start making those connections. Okay, so number one, who are they? Define who they are. Are they peers? Are they supervisors? Are they clients? Who are you going to need to help you get to that next level or get those steps that you want to get to? Get in their head. What are their wants? What are their desires? What problem do they need solved? And what do they seek in a construction professional? That's where you come in. This might take some time, and you have to kind of get outside of the box and think about things from their perspective. And why this is important is, depending on the levels and the different people you're trying to connect with, they're going to have different wants and needs. So you're going to have to tailor your approach and structure your conversations a little bit differently, depending on who you're talking to. So some examples are, if it's peers and colleagues, you're going to use a different technique to connect authentically with them. If it's supervisors and managers, there's going to be different things that you're going to look at building a rapport with those people in leadership roles, which we'll cover later on. Could be clients or stakeholders on the other side of the fence, building relationships with people if you're negotiating a contract or you're dealing with some conflict resolution, which we'll get into later. It's just really important to, identify who you are targeting and how you can solve their problem. And the only way you can do that is by getting into their heads and trying to understand what you need to be and what solution you can provide to best suit their need, which will help you connect with them and advance your career. So what I wanted to touch on here was the importance and significance in building authentic connections and not coming across as phony or superficial or using people to get ahead. Okay, so number one, why authenticity matters. Authenticity is probably the most important part of any relationship, because if you're not authentic with somebody, they can't trust you. Being genuine, being upfront, being yourself, being consistent, these are all things that uh, build rapport and help to build connections and will help form positive correlations with you in people's brains. Being authentic and treating people like humans, believe it or not, is actually a refreshing take on construction, because it is an industry that's focused on transactions and deadlines and milestones and goals and penalties and all this and that. People forget about the human element. So just taking the time to be authentic with somebody and connect with them at a basic human level, it's going to do wonders for you, and it has done for me in my career time and time again. Every day I'm making connections with people, and it's really helps to fuel your own mission too. So it's important to humanize it. That's part of being authentic, is just being human, connecting with somebody. Okay. So what happens if you don't? What happens if you're phony and you use people? It might work in the short term, but they're going to figure it out, and it's going to end up hurting you in the long run, because people aren't stupid. Please, please, please do not use this information nefariously and go out and build fake connections and walk over people to get ahead, because it's not gonna build a sustainable legacy for yourself. This slide, it's brief, it's 4 bullet points. We cover more in the workbook, but these are the two most powerful things you can do to connect with anybody. Even the most hard-nosed person that you've ever met in the industry, these things will help to, break down those walls and build those connections. This is really a foundational skill to connecting with people. Okay. So the key to active listening is listen to understand, not to be understood. So I'm going to say that again and explain it a little bit. Listen to understand, not to be understood. And I want you to picture a conversation you were having with somebody. It could have been, your wife or your kids or somebody at work, and you were essentially fighting over something and trying to prove your point. Were you actually listening to what the other person was saying, or were you just waiting for them to take a breath so you could cut in and prove your point, or take your turn in the argument? It takes a special skill to learn this. I really don't believe it's innate in many people. So don't feel bad if you don't practice this, but really listen to understand. And it's okay to take a moment. If somebody, especially if they're going off on you, it's okay to take a moment, let it process, and come up with an intelligible response to somebody. Okay. So actually listen is number one. That's how you communicate. A lot of people think communication is, me talking and getting my point across, but really it's understanding what the other person is saying, analyzing it, and coming up with the best response. Because quite often things are reactionary and it's knee jerk, and you end up saying something you might regret. Okay, so take a moment, listen actively, make sure you understand what the other person is saying. Empathy is huge. So just a quick note on the difference between sympathy and empathy, and they're not used interchangeably. So sympathy is if you have experienced the exact situation that somebody is going through, and you've been there and you've done that, and you can provide some advice. Rarely is that the case, even if you're in a situation and say somebody's dog died or something, to use an example. You might have had a dog that died, but it would have affected you differently than that other person. So expressing empathy is the ability to be there with that person and hold space for them and just be there with them and acknowledge what they're feeling. Okay. You don't have to have a psychology degree. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just have to be there with somebody and not always try and fix the problem. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They're not always looking for a solution. One important question to ask in these situations, especially if somebody is venting to you or, maybe oversharing a little bit, is saying, do you want advice or do you just want to vent? Okay. Because rarely do people want solutions. They can figure out their shit on their own. But sometimes they'll ask you explicitly for advice. But most of the time they know what to do. They just want to tell somebody and have somebody validate their experience. So this might sound cheesy to you, but I swear it works. It's empathy and active listening. When you combine them together, they're the most powerful human connectors, and you can't go wrong by doing this. Okay. Another really important and critical thing when you are trying to build relationships with somebody is finding common ground. So, what are some ways that you can find common ground? You can do some research. You can, just observe interactions with colleagues and clients. You can Google them. A lot of people have, if they're on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can see what their hobbies are. You can see the things they're into. If they post content, what type of content do they post? These are easy things that you can strike up conversations on and find common grounds on. Even just listening to conversations in the office or asking coworkers, if you're interested in making a connection with John over there, you can talk to your buddy and say, oh, what's John into? What does he like? What does he not like? So, kind of things to, start conversations on and connect on. Be curious. This is one thing that, I reflect on my experience with my kids a lot. Kids are always curious, they're always asking questions about everything. And at some point in people's lives, it's like you forget about that stuff. Maybe somebody told you to shut up or stop asking questions. I don't know. But just ask questions. So, especially when you get into conversing with people and connecting with them, you can ask prompting questions. Okay. It's going to help pull information out on finding common ground. A lot of times, what do people default to when you start a conversation? You're like, oh, how are you today? And then the other person says, good. It's like, okay, yeah, did you have a good weekend? Yes. Like, those are yes or no questions. They're closed ended. And if somebody doesn't have the time for you, they're just going to give you a one word answer and walk away. You need to learn to ask prompting questions to pull information out. For example, did you have a good weekend? Yes. Oh, what was good about it? That question will lead to conversation. Then they'll say, oh, we had a football tournament. My son plays flag football, as an example. Oh, do you watch football? I've never played flag football, but do you watch football? What's your favorite team? Do you like NFL, CFL? There's all these things that you can start to connect on. You can ask questions and it will lead you down a path and you'll find these things to connect on. And what's happening when you find these common grounds and make those connections? You're building a bridge between yourself and the other person or other people. Okay. So every time they find something in common, literally something fires in their brain and they make a positive association with you. Okay. Same thing if you share dislikes as well. You can connect over dislikes if you dislike the same stuff. Again, this has to be authentic. You can't come across as phony. It helps to write stuff down so you can reference it, but you don't want to obviously be looking at it being like, okay, he likes cheeseburgers. Talk about cheeseburgers. No, it has to be natural, and it takes some practice, and it can be awkward at first, but stick to it, practice, and things will get easier. One of the key foundational elements of any relationship is trust. Okay. You can't be in a healthy relationship with somebody that you don't trust. And don't get me started on trust in construction because it's severely lacking. And I think it's the main cause of a lot of issues that we face in the industry. So when you're building these connections and you're going out and meeting people and talking to people, it's very important to be open, transparent, and authentic when you're communicating with others. Okay. So how can you do this? How can you be open and honest? People love to connect, especially, if you're connecting with certain types of people at work over vulnerability. Okay. That's a tricky thing in construction because a lot of times you don't want to express vulnerability. It's hard to admit when you made a mistake. It's hard to talk about past mistakes. But when you can open up to somebody about that, or they can open up about that to you and feel comfortable in that space, that helps you build a super strong connection with that person. So be honest about what your experiences, what you're going through. Ask for help. People love helping others, especially if you're talking to a more senior person that you're trying to connect with. Maybe it's a manager or a supervisor, and you say, you know what, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me out? That's an easier situation to deal with. Even if they say, oh, what's wrong with you, idiot? That's a better situation to deal with than faking it and pretending you know what you're doing, or taking a gamble and making a mistake, because it's going to be more costly and it's going to take more time to fix that mistake than ask a stupid question. So be vulnerable, be open, have honest conversation. That's going to help you connect with people. Just be yourself. Again, this goes back to the first module where you really want to align the efforts that you're putting into around your core values and your personality. Because if you're trying to, attain, uh, to fit into the identity of somebody that you're not, you're going to struggle, and that's going to come across to other people, and they're going to have a hard time, trusting you, because they can tell that you might be struggling a little bit with the way you're acting. So it's important to be you and humanize your brand, and really make it, to really own it, and be yourself. The number one thing too here is being consistent with the way that you interact with people, and it's not like consistent same times, same day, uh, talk about the same things. We'll cover this a little bit in module 3 too, but trust isn't built in a day. It's like Rome wasn't built in a day. Trust can sometimes take years to build up, and just the repetition of smaller type of interactions that kind of help build things up. If you want to look at it like a bank account, it's like every time you interact with somebody and you show integrity and that they can trust you, you put a little deposit into the bank account, and over time that money or that trust accumulates, and you build up trust and rapport and a reputation, and a relationship with that person. Now, the opposite can happen as well. Same with a bank account. You can put money in to save it, but sometimes you might have an expense, right? You might make a mistake. You might say something offside, or you might make a bad decision, and funds or trust gets withdrawn from that account. And you can always put more in, but it's tougher once it starts to go down to accumulate it back up. So be consistent and persistent with your efforts, and it will help you to advance your career. So in this module, we took what we learned in module 1 about your personal brand and building the foundation, and now we learned the skills and techniques that you can use to help start building connections and leveraging that personal brand that we built in module 1. And in the next module, we're going to look into strategies to connect with people, where you can start applying these skills based on your personal brand, and start making those connections that are going to help you advance your career. So take a pause, check your workbook. Hope you're enjoying yourself so far, and we'll see you over in module 3.